Another thing about Vertigo too is that when they announced the casting over the summer, I was under the impression that he was gonna be one of the big villains this season, and no, like he was only there for 2 episodes. Like I got the impression he was gonna be like this Brother Blood type villain, where he's not quite the big villain of the season, but he's like up there. He's maybe like the second command per se. Uh, I don't know. I mean, I guess the character's all right. It's just, don't name him after the new 52 count Vertigo and then not do that character. It just seems like why? Why even bother? Again, my conspiracy theory. I think that was just Kreisberg being like, "Oh, no hard feelings, Jeff Lemire. We're gonna use your guy on the show," and no, that's not what you did. The one thing I will say though that I did like about how they used Vertigo this season is that they set him up as a foil kind of rival to Black Canary. And if you know your DC Comics, Count Vertigo started off as a Black Canary villain, so that's something. I mean, he he's not a bad character. It's just you didn't need the Batman shit, and we all know how I feel about putting Batman stuff in this show, and it just doesn't work with this universe. And okay, so this episode, not a whole lot to say about it. Actually, my notes on the second episode, or I have a lot more notes. But I guess that's kind of to be expected. It's the first episode of a new season, so you're kind of setting the stage for what's to come and things. So yeah, we're starting off the episode. And, Team Arrow over the summer they've been kicking ass and taking names. So Roy's part of the team now, and like I talked about before, this doesn't exactly make sense because he got his archery training while he's fucked up on the Mirror Crew. He got the Mirror Crew cure, and he was supposed to have forgotten everything he did while he was fucked up on Mirror Crew, and then suddenly he's just an archer. Okay, so yeah, I mean, how long it's fucking been? It's been less than a year. Suddenly worth the trading. Suddenly he's a full-fledged member of the team, and he can kick ass with like Oliver and everyone else. Okay. Um, So Oliver's having this arc where he, like I said, the Nolan Batman stuff. So I figured, first season Batman Begins, second season Dark Knight Rises. I figured they're gonna do the Dark Knight here, right? Complete the trilogy. So it's this thing here where he thinks that he can give up being Green Arrow now and he can go on and do a normal life. It's not only that, but you also had the Scarecrow stuff, and you also there's this thing that Vertigo, the speech he gives Oliver about the symbiotic relationship between Green Arrow and Count Vertigo, which is kind of like the Joker Batman relationship in that movie. Which I don't know if that they exactly earned that because I never really got the impression that there was a big rivalry between Green Arrow and Count Vertigo, at least not in this universe. Like they didn't establish that enough yet, as he was only they only ran into each other about 3 times before the original Count Vertigo was killed off, so I don't think that was entirely earned. So anyway, he decides, he's lighting up. He's like, he decides to take Felicity on a date, and there's also this thing going on where Diggle knocked up his ex-wife, and they're having a baby, and then they have the baby, and Oliver's like, you should, sit this out. You can't be out in the field anymore. And Diggle disagrees, but then, um, he sees the birth of his daughter, and then he reconsiders, like, Oliver, you're right, blah, blah, blah. So he runs into Count Vertigo, they get in a fight. Uh, Vertigo puts a tracking device on Oliver, so then Oliver goes on the date with Felicity, and Count Vertigo fires a giant bazooka at the restaurant. He doesn't see Green Arrow there, but he knows he must be in there somewhere. So the whole place gets blown up, and it's pretty amusing. And it's a bit of a continuity error. I guess you can call it a continuity error. I would call it a continuity error. And this also happens sometime later in the second half of the season too, where okay, so Felicity and Oliver both get blown up. Felicity's pretty fucked up from the explosion. The next scene we see her, like, we see Oliver bring her to the Arrow Cave, and she gets medical attention or something. The very next scene, she's completely fine. Even though she has blood and shit over her and she's unconscious and stuff. The next scene we see her, she's completely fine. And it's like there needed to be a scene in between. Like it's just like, oh, well, she got blown up. Oh, next scene, she's okay. And this would suggest something that, my whole conspiracy theory about this season, that the writing was rushed, that the actors are, in fact, acting out first drafts of scripts. Because as soon as someone would have caught that, anybody could have caught that. It just looks weird. You needed something in between there. And much like the Roy Harper thing, where later on, where they established that they have Oliver and him have a brother, like this brotherly bond. Like, you needed to see a scene there, but no one notices. Like, it doesn't work. And my whole conspiracy theory too is that the writing on the show, the reason why it suffered so bad is because you have the same people working on Flash and Arrow. So it's kind of like, it seemed like Flash this season was a lot better written than Arrow was. So my belief is what happened is that they just poured all their resources, the writing resources, into Flash, and then Arrow, they were just like, fuck it, we're just going to do first drafts. We don't have the time to really fine-tune the scripts or anything, just fuck it, first drafts. Yeah, so anyway, they get blown up, and, let's see, and then, Wildcat shows up, Ted Grant, and then, like, a little scene where, he's in the climax of the episode. Arrow faces off of Count Vertigo again. And they're at this prize fight, and then Wildcat's there fighting. But he becomes a more important character later on, to a certain extent, at least for a little while. Ray Palmer, kind of hostile takeover thing of Queen Consolidated, and we talked about this last episode where he, it's kind of a double beat we've seen this last season with Isabel Rochev taking over the company. He also kind of starts stalking Felicity, and it's kind of obvious that he has a thing for Felicity. And then Oliver has this kind of somber realization that, because of the whole traumatic experience of getting blown up in the restaurant, that he can't walk away from being Green Arrow. He has to be Green Arrow, and there's really no chance for him to have a normal life, or at least not now. And just as he comes to this realization, he gets a call from Barry Allen, the Flash. So this episode is happening concurrently with the pilot of the Flash, and the Flash pilot was shot months prior to when this episode was shot. And you don't actually see the scene in this show, you just know this is when it happens. But you see the actual meeting between them in the Flash pilot. But they reference this is when the scene occurs. So Oliver goes from the somber realization that he has to be a reluctant hero. Then he goes on the Flash. He talks to Barry Allen about the joys of being a superhero and how great it is to be a superhero. See how it doesn't work? Like, it would have been better that the scene in the Flash pilot didn't actually happen during this episode. It happened sometime, I don't know, like a day or two prior or something. But I guess they wanted to, I don't know, like they wanted like to really hit it off early with these crossovers, like they wanted to tease the audience with crossovers right from the get-go. Way to go, guys! Your very first crossover, and you fucked it up. It doesn't like it makes no sense for Oliver to be in that like a positive fucking emotional state at that point when he was just all somber and like reluctant hero and then all of a sudden he's all like, oh, like, hey, Barry, be a hero. It's great. Doesn't work. So we end the episode with Sarah shows up at the end with the big Count Vertigo fight. And she kind of pops out of nowhere and then finishes off Count Vertigo and he's taken to jail. And it's revealed that she's there for some reason. And she's kind of vague about it. And then she gets killed by somebody. And she's like, what are you doing here? And we see the killer's point of view. She gets hit by a bunch of arrows. And her sister Laurel finds her body. And that's where we end the episode. Now taking this episode completely out of context, like if knowing what they do with the flashbacks in this episode, so you notice they weren't even worth mentioning. Knowing what I should word it, without knowing what they're gonna do with the flashbacks, without knowing what they're gonna do with shitty discount Iron Man, without I admit my personal bias against the Batman shit. I don't think that Batman stuff belongs here, and constant allusions and references to Batman. It's overbearing. But forgetting that the version of Count Vertigo they did is not true to the source material. And fine, they can do whatever they want. That doesn't make it necessarily a bad thing that they're not being true to the source material. All that. Forgetting that, just taking it out of context, this is a good episode. This is a good start to the season. And actually, it's doing a murder mystery. This is setting up a murder mystery. Who the killer of Sarah is actually a good way to start this out, because it's different than what they did the first two seasons, where you just had a villain in the background. He does some stuff here and there, and it's a slow build to eventually get to the finale where there's a big destroy the city plot, and then Oliver has a big showdown with the big bad guy at the end. So, or at least seemingly. That's what it seemed like starting out. It seemed like it was going to be something different, but, spoilers, it quickly devolves into yet another big villain plot to destroy the city with the big fucking showdown with the bad guy at the end. Because apparently these writers they're not creative enough to fucking do something different. But at least we got something different for at least the first few episodes. Or, at least suggest that they were going to do something different. So, overall, good episode, good start. It was continuing that kind of pace from the second season, continuing the momentum, didn't really seem to miss a step there. Right? So then, the second episode, much like the first episode, our villain is another new 52 Jeff Lemire character. And this character is Komodo. And Komodo is quite an important character in the New 52 Green Arrow mythology, as he's the protege to Robert Queen and things, and he's the head of the Arrow Clan, and he kind of raises Oliver's half sister Amiko, and he has this whole thing about getting the Green Arrow and all this thing, and he's like a very important part to the New 52 mythology of Green Arrow. And from watching this episode, you would not get that impression at all. You would not, because essentially they just make him a hired gun. He's just a generic thug.